Welcome to the Iorì Was a Front Page podcast brought to you by First Nations Fiber. In this episode, we sit down with Mohawk Council Kahnawake Chief Ryan Montour and we discuss his adjustment to working on council and some of the files he's worked on since being elected last year.
First Nations Wireless is now First Nations Fiber. You've seen our team working through the community to get you connected. From the new development to the OCR, from the 207 to Clay Mountains, FN Fiber makes fiber optic internet easy for everyone. Coming to Kahnawake soon. Visit radio.fnfiber.com to sign up today.
Welcome back to our the Iorì Was a Front Page podcast, and we're sitting here with MCK Chief Ryan Montour. It's his first time coming into the podcast, since he's been elected. He was a guest here before last summer's election, so he's been very busy in his first term in office. So let everybody know some of the things that you've been working on lately.
Yeah, I just want to take the time here to appreciate Mr. Greg Horn for inviting me to the podcast. There's so many avenues of communications approaches that we can take, whether it be print media. This is a new way of doing things. So for myself, during my first 2 quarters in office, I feel like they went back fast, really fast. There's so much work that I've been involved with just because of my portfolios. So I'll start on public safety. Obviously, we're in the middle of hopefully moving towards the end of the pandemic, but there is a lot of safety measures that have to be looked at, and restrictions and measures and meetings and decisions that have to be made regarding the safety and security of Kahnawake. So that keeps me busy. But I want to mention that there's a lot more of other areas within public safety that people don't really know about, or maybe are just not in tune with what falls under public safety portfolio. So I made it a point for myself to visit every unit, almost every unit, whether it be animal control or the sanitation, clean soil policy, sanitation law, parole supervision. That's a big one that I can relate to. And, there's a lot of areas of jurisdiction that we're continually to fight, whether it be because the peacekeepers fall under public safety division. So, there's administrative jurisdictional issues where we have to fight off Quebec government and what they want to do, whether it be just, we have a policing agreement, but there's other matters pertaining to ethics committee, police service board, stuff like that they're continually trying to find a way in to assert their jurisdiction over us. And it's my job as public safety portfolio chief to never allow that to happen. And the same with for the parole supervision. Correction Service Canada, unfortunately, took back all the community supervision programs on anybody that's like a halfway house. We had a working agreement with a halfway house in Montreal. There was an unfortunate incident that happened in Quebec, and Correction Service Canada pulled all community supervision all across the board, which in turn affected Kahnawake. It's always been our stance and my stance personally that Kahnawake knows what's best for Kahnawake, and we are definitely going to be involved with asserting that jurisdiction over the reintegration of our own people. I'm glad to say that we did work out an interim agreement for the time being where we will be involved. We'll be involved in all aspects of it through the Commissioner of Public Safety and the Pro Reintegration Officer. So I'm happy to say that we will still be involved with that.
Okay. Public safety is one of the portfolios that you hold. Of course, that's been probably for the last 2 years, the portfolio that's been most at the forefront in the community with Commissioner of Public Safety Lloyd Phillips and the task force and regarding the ongoing pandemic. But what are some of the other files that you're working on? So
for me, the biggest file, which takes up I would say 70% of my time would obviously be the housing file. It's so massive and in scale and the amount of clients that are served within the community of Kahnawake. When I got on, obviously we were in the middle of a housing crisis, or a shortage, I should say. And for myself is the same direction when I got on to give the housing unit is to, let's restructure, let's fix this housing crisis that we're in currently. I'm happy to say that there has been an additional reallocation of resources like there's been more resources allocated in the last little while in the housing unit in a long time. Currently, right now, there's a job opening for a generalist at the housing stage, but our executive director, and we have a new unit housing director. They have done a great job so far. You know, they updated the council in last October on the state of the affairs. You know, a couple things that were brought to our attention. You know, I felt the community had a right to know. With us being transparency, and that's when we released the first statement. The arrear situation within the community. You know, it was on a massive scale, and it was eye opening. You know, like my whole mission in leading up to the election campaign, and you'll hear it off all the council chiefs, is housing. Right, that was the main word, and for us to fix it, you know, it'll take a little bit of time, but we're definitely moving in the right direction, and we are moving, I would say, faster than has been done in the past.
This past fall, that came out about the amount of people that have been in arrears, whether it be through rents at the MCK town apartments or mortgages or whatever. Is that situation improved? Have people started to make arrangements to pay some of the back rents and whatever?
Yeah, there's been I could say that there's been a better communication plan with the residents or the tenants, for a lack of a better word, for all MCK social housing. I think the main problem behind that was obviously the housing scandal, the lack of trust within the housing unit because of the scandal. But I believe that with this additional concentration of resources and the political will of the table and myself, that we are definitely pushing them in the right direction, and they are listening. You know, in the next couple of weeks, there will be a restructuring plan that will be presented to council for the amount of arrears. Yes, I could say that I know there's more people that have been in contact with housing, you know, for in regard to the arrears. I don't want to quote the exact numbers, but I could safely say that. For us as a Mohawk Council, we just recently backed a private individual in the community who wants to build housing for Kahnawake. Basically, just a letter of support because I know they're accessing funds to Aboriginal business. And if the private sector wants to get involved, I encourage anybody who wants to get involved in this industry. You know, it's much needed. And with that, the bottom line is every man, woman, and child deserve a place to call home. You know, that's what strengthens us as a community and a family. First of all, the family unit, you need the stability of a roof over your head to make all the mental wellness being of your family first, right? You build that strong family unit, and it starts with that. Employment, of course, and education. I mean, it all boils into one, but we can start with a roof over everybody's head. And that's been my mission, and it won't stop.
You touched on the housing scandal. You know, there's a lot of people still asking questions where it's at. You know, is there going to be arrests or charges being made? And I know that at this point, a lot is out of the MCK's hands, and the file's been presented to the prosecutor. And is there any update that you know? Yeah,
so I guess in June, it was reported that the UPAC, Unit Permanent Anti-Corruption de Quebec, had finished their forensic audit of the housing unit, and charges were imminent. That was relayed to the community back in June, I believe, of 2021. So just before I got on council. When I got on council, one of the first questions I asked is, what's the status of this case? There was a lot of people didn't know this, but you know, I know this as a complainant. We have a right to know the status of our case, you know? So we did make attempts to, not politically, obviously, but the person who was in charge of the case for Kahnawake did reach out to the prosecutor's office again in November. And at that point in the investigation, I believe that it was relayed to us that they're still continuing, going over files and everything. But for us, we know, and I know firsthand, if this happens in outside jurisdiction, you know, I've seen people get charged with something simple as credit card fraud and face 5 years in prison over something that simple. And I know because I guess maybe it's Kahnawake, that they can say, well, it's only Ganawage, and unfortunately in the justice system that we're at, because the peacekeepers have done their job, right? Ganawage has done their job. It's been handed over. So I've just recently been asked again to make sure that I do my job and ask the people who are the plaintiffs in this case. I will not say the name for MCK, but I will say that, yes, they will be asked every day, every week. I also have an update coming from Minister of Security Public that I'm hopefully to organize a meeting soon with Minister of Public Security, or at least someone in their office, for them to also do the same. That's the number one question in the minds of the community, and it's the number one question in my mind. As fast as I get an official update, I will answer the community. I think that's one thing that I've been pushing, is to be transparent, and community members deserve to know. I think it will alleviate the longstanding questions of when will justice be served, right? Because what happened to the community members, it was our most vulnerable community members that this happened to. It's unspeakable. Like, for our community members to be basically frauded from persons who were in a trusted place, right? So I won't let it stop. I will do my job to keep asking the questions of the prosecutor's office of when will we get answers? And the minute I get answers, you can pretty much bet the next day Ganawagi will know.
Moving on from housing, you have a couple portfolios, and you said that you've been very busy and you've been really out there in the community. And so, what are some of the other things that you're seeing?
Well, one of the most important things, Greg, for me, I always like to say we don't really see MCK giving back to the community, right? We see that in all aspects. It might be the perception, but I'm happy to say that on Labor Day weekend, I'm part of Ganawagi Search and Rescue Team, as is yourself. If you recall the call out that we had, it prompted me to realize the deficiencies that were assessed with the safety equipment vehicles in St. Lucie. I was very active in pushing for a full vehicle assessment and saying it's my job to fight for you guys up here to be able to do your jobs, And then the unfortunate incidents that happened later with the shooting of the hunter, that prompted another series of questions. And why don't we have the necessary equipment to handle the situation? And then the fire. So there was 3 successive events, and I always don't like to react to negatives, So when the missing person went missing in Labor Day weekend, I start pushing from the public safety side. I also did good with Cody Dybel for the lands unit, because they are actually in charge of St. Lucie. So, and the technicians that work there, Veronica LeBourne and Tara McCumber, did an amazing job putting in the vehicle requests and why we needed them, along with public safety's input. We pushed it through, and I'm happy to say the portfolio chiefs on the FAO committee approved the purchase of new vehicles, So that was probably one of the first things that I accomplished. I have pictures of it now. They got the Argo. They have 2 brand new Skidoos coming, a truck, a trailer. They have bush packs now. So what's happening is they have the necessary equipment to either all emergency situations will be covered, and also for them to traverse the roads at least, because fire roads got to be cut down and there's overgrown brush, So there's great movement on there. There's another file that I'm proud to say that I'm actually the lead. It's a portfolio. It's called Regulatory Boards and Commissions and Labor. So I'm the lead portfolio chief on that too. What that encompasses is massive in itself. I am the portfolio chief for ABC board now. I am the lead on MSI, but that also encompasses cannabis and tobacco and labor and gaming. So it never really got off the ground, but I've been pushing to get a technician, and we are identifying in terms of reference, and we're going to get this portfolio off the ground, like every individual file has their own portfolio chief, but to bring it all together under one umbrella, it's going to be one of the biggest ones in the MCK. I could say that I've been meeting with MSI people that, it was identified for the carpenters that the premiums were way too high. And that stems from the labor agreement from carpenter rates on the Mercier Bridge. That's industrial commercial. So what we did is, together with Joel Jacobs and Ashley Oak, we did a tier system. So it would be industrial commercial for MSI premiums. That will remain the same. I think it's 10%. And we instituted a tier 2 system, which would include residential. Because obviously, a carpenter on Mercier Bridge makes $44 an hour. That's just incompatible with residential local building construction. So what we can do now is pretty much bring it into line with what the going rate is for a local contractor. And then when we went tier 1 would be tier 3, would be the private people. So basically we worked out the numbers. We had it all financially vested and all that, but it's not official yet. So I don't want to come on, but the premiums will be cut down. And for the first time in the history, we're trying to give them the carpenters a pension, true case populaire, and we're just trying to mend it all together. And hopefully soon I will have some major news on that. So I just want to say, even for the ideal to lower the premiums, there's a lot of front end work that has to be done with our technicians, with the people working in the units. So I spent a lot of time on there meeting with the local contractors, right? Because of course, they always think of as insurance as a tax, basically, right? And for me to try and convince them, of course they're worried about work, so that ties into housing, right? So I'm really hoping that we can all work together, both the units, and come up with the biggest construction boom in Kahnawake. That's my hope. And, if I'm a little part of the reason, then I'll take that.
This is your first foray into the political forum, right? How has been your first several months on council? How has it been compared to what you expected before you got elected?
Oh, I thought I was coming in and I was changing the world, Basically, I know the person I am as an individual, I have a clear, strong mind, and have a military background, and that's how my attitude was going in. It took me a little while to get used to the procedures, right? The procedures. A lot of people, what they don't understand with an MCK, they actually think that they control everything. MCK has 2 employees, the Council of Chiefs. That's the executive director, Mo Council Kahnawake, and our political advisor. That's the only 2 employees that we basically control. The rest is all operations. So every unit has their own operations, and we're not to interfere with that. What we are there to do is give direction to the operations team. This is what we want. Can you come up with a plan, make it happen? And always, from a military, I want it done as quickly as possible, So that, for me, that was the hardest adjustment, I brought up a food basket thing early in my thing, because the food basket was asking for, requesting some help. It's totally operational thing, right? And, I'm a chief. The next day in training, we had a governance training course. The next day, the instructor said, as a chief, you feed your people. We're seeing a lot of problems with that now, with the elder population, right? On fixed income. Prices are rising. Inflation is 5.2% right now. The price of groceries is going up. Gas is $1.56 yesterday. They're having a hard time. And as the Mohawk Council Kahnawake, Office of the Council of Chiefs, I think it's, we have to do something, and that whole generation, the baby boomer generation, a lot of them don't have pensions, right? That never came into anybody's mind. Even my Generation X, nobody really has a pension. You're looking at the tobacco industry. We got 900 to 1,000 people, without a pension. It's scary moving forward in the future. And if they're asking help for now, sure. Well, what do we do when half our community doesn't have pension? And how do you differentiate the mothers living in moldy homes and the the mothers with no homes and the conditions of the old existing homes, how do we balance the allocation of resources? Do we pay our elders an income supplement, and then we say no to the mothers with young children? So there's a fine line, and that's what we're doing our best to address. But I think the main word here, and I'll take it right out of Mike DeLille's playbook, is income security, right? I mean, it was identified during this pandemic that obviously there is no income security in Guanajuato for a vast portion of our people. So moving forward, education is the way to go with Dewadunizata. I know they were thinking of doing some educational financial literacy courses, and that moves right into home ownership too. There's a lot of education that has to be done. I'm just glad that I could help one sector of the community, but I want to move it into the tobacco industry. We have a emerging cannabis industry coming up for dealing with all the stuff that's going on in Guanajuato, all the hurt and anger, right? I mean, it started with the Me Too Twitter movement, or awakening, I will call it, falling into residential school, right? Then the Indian day schools, then the rise of the 215, and then the Father Lajoie issue, moving into COVID restrictions and measures. There's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of anger, and it's all being brought to the surface.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the last 2 years, it seems like every other week there was something new that was traumatic, right, for the community. And basically throughout the entire pandemic, the community has been in reactionary mode rather than, being able to sit back and kind of deal with some of these things, right?
Yeah, so the last official task force meeting was Wednesday. One of the main things that they were mandated with was to create a wellness action team to deal with traumas, anxiety, depression, anger that was brought on just by the pandemic itself, but also to deal with all these other issues. As a Mohawk Council, we are dealing with the whole community as a whole. I just recently left a meeting today. I'm in charge. Been mandated by my council fellow chiefs to come up with the community healing plan, just because of my past journey and stuff like that. But I can say that it will take time, but there's a lot of awakening, that we have to come to as a people. There's a lot of denial going on right now, and a lot of people have been affected in one way or another through one of the 6 things that I just mentioned. So we're trying to hold on the fort as we speak. There's a lot of work. We're actively working on it, and I have a great plan together for the healing of the community that I will be working on real soon. I had the initial meeting and with another fellow chief, and I knew because this is the best person I think would be able to lead the charge. And I told the council, I said, this is not a KSCS problem. This is a community problem. We need to have our own plan. We need to work together collaboratively with everybody in this community, both traditional longhouses, the people, and anybody that's willing to help, because we do need a lot of help as a community.
Yeah. Any parting words?
I just want to take the time to thank you, Greg, for coming on here. It's always great to be able to express some of the work that you are doing for your community. There's so many ways to get it out there, but a lot of people say that they didn't know, they didn't know. And there's press releases and print and radio and one-on-ones. I can't wait to have a community meeting. We're actually pushing for it sooner rather than later. It's time for our community to heal, and I hope to be part of the solution.
Okay, great. Now I'll go.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Iorì Front Page podcast. Be sure to check out our other podcasts like Iorì Profiles, Meatheads, and The Beating Table on Google and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The views and opinions of the guests expressed in this podcast do not reflect those of Iorì and its employees.